Hello, good morning, good evening, good day, good afternoon, and aloha. Welcome back to another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UFOs and sometimes other things. I'm going to apologize right off the bat if there's a delay in the video. I'm sorry, that's the internet. First world problems. So we continue. We do have a fun guest tonight, but before we get into that, I want to just remind everybody next Wednesday, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, we are going to be interviewing Lou Elizondo. So we got him for an hour and a half. I am going to pack in as many possible questions as I can. And so ring that bell. Make sure you ring that bell so that way you do not miss out next week because it is going to be epic. I'm calling it right now. So today we're going to be talking about UFO news, happenings, and Dwight D. Eisenhower with my friend John Dardenne, who's an actor, improviser out here in Los Angeles with me. He's a really fun dude. We've had him on the show before. We had a really great conversation. Hey, Codeword Havoc, how are you doing? Grab that popcorn, get comfortable, put on some cozies. I don't know, what is a cozy? Is that a thing? Anyway, let's get started with bringing in Mr. John Dardenne. John.
Hey. I put on those cozies.
Yeah, I don't know what a cozy is. I just made it up, but if it sounds comfortable, doesn't it?
Yeah. I know koozies are like you put around a can to keep warm.
I think that's sort of the inspiration for it.
Well, I'm down.
Was a koozie, but hey. So how are you doing? How is life in the COVID world?
Oh, just being a hypochondriac in a pandemic is always a nightmare. So, today I'm like, is it it? Is this it? You have like a micro moment where you're like, well, okay, well, maybe this is the beginning of the end. And all we can do is laugh about it. It's not, I don't mean to make fun of it. It's just, we all have to kind of put on a brave face.
Man, it feels like I keep going back and forth with it. Like, sometimes I feel it's like, all right, you know what? Screw this. Like, you got to just go out. You got to do things. Go see your family if you want to see your family. And then I'll be like, wait a second, it's a pandemic. Like, what the hell are you talking about? Stop. It's tough. It's like, some people people react differently to it. Like, my dad had it, and he smoked cigars every day. He's like the epitome of not the greatest person in the greatest health, and he was fine. But then I hear about an NBA podcaster and analyst today, literally right before we came on the show, and a young guy, and he was covering NBA games a month ago. He died today. Like, it's just it's weird. It's a weird virus. It's funny how it just grabs people differently. But anyway, let's not bum people out with that. I feel like we start off on the wrong foot. Jesus, I'm sorry.
Look,
I'm sorry. Why did I ask you? How's life in the COVID world? That's on me, man. That's on me.
No, I could have deflected. It's like, how are you doing? And it's like, you go, hey, how you doing? And some guy's like, John, actually not well.
John, I am the host of the show. It's my responsibility to not bring it down. JC, what's happening? Ryan, what's happening? Christopher, what is happening? Everyone in the StreamYard Chad. I hope you guys are here enjoying all of this wonderful content. As I said before, ring that bell so that way you're here for Lou Elizondo, because that is going to be awesome. Okay, so there's a couple things I wanted to talk about before we go into, I guess, what could we call it? Your Eisenhower report?
We're going to call it my Eisenhower report.
Excellent. So stay tuned for the Eisenhower report. And so a couple things I wanted to just quickly share with everyone. And that is, let's bring in this screen here for you guys. So the first thing was this: the countdown to possible UFO disclosure. It's 148 days now until this supposed report is supposed to come out. And the reason why I bring this up is because I have talked with Lou Elizondo, and John, I'm sure if I can get you to participate in this, I think it's going to basically be, the idea is going to be a telethon. We're going to do a telethon on a certain day. Actually, I've written a mission statement and everything that is going to go along with this, but I got Alejandro Rojas on board. I've got Ryan Sprague on board. I'm going to talk to Lou Elizondo, and see if I can get him on board. And we're basically organizing an event called the Big Phone Home. That's what I'm calling it. It's a multilateral effort to encourage and lead UFO enthusiasts on the same day to call Congress and express their desire for UFO disclosure. The 180-day countdown has begun in Congress, and if nothing is done, nothing will be revealed. So on this day, and it's going to be May 24th, 2021, I think is the day that I've settled on. It'll be the 56th anniversary of the Lonnie Zamora case. So I thought that was a cool date. And it also gives us 2 months. It gives Congress to coordinate the report for 2 months. It gives them 2 months basically to put more stuff into this report, hopefully. I figured, hey, it can't hurt. If we can coordinate as many people as we can and as many shows, podcasters, show hosts, YouTube channels, anyone who has a UFO channel to either call into my show or vice versa, and encourage their listeners, encourage everyone that follows them to do this. And the idea is hopefully through Lou Elizondo and maybe through Lou Elizondo, I can get Chris Mellon. I would love for them to write a script for people to read when they do call Congress. And we'll do that here on the show, and we'll invite people on the show to do it with us. And the idea is to convince Congress and to be very specific in what we're asking for when this report gets released. Because if we don't call, if we do nothing, there's going to be nothing released. This report is going to be a big dud. As the grumblings that I'm hearing right now is that it's basically going to be put together like a book report at the last minute without doing, without doing any real research on the book or reading the book for that matter. And you just get a passing grade. We can put some real pressure if we could even get 1,000 people to call and express their feelings about UFO disclosure and what they want to see in these reports. I think it's a helpful thing. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about. What do you think about that? Do you think that's a little kooky idea, or do you think it's something worth pursuing?
I guess I'm idealistic in that I think that Congress does respond well to real, tangible pressure from constituents. So if there was enough volume, they would at least be forced to address it. And that doesn't mean they're going to do what you say, but right. I say that. And then at the beginning of Obama's term, they had like the We Are Change or the change.org petitions. Like the biggest ones are very highly signed ones involved UFO disclosure. Yeah. And then nothing, not a lot happened.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this. You were speaking about Obama's administration. There was a time, I'm trying to remember what war it was that we almost started, but basically, I think it was
Syria.
It might have been Syria, if my memory serves correctly. And he was about to go in and drop bombs or provide boots on the ground. That was the big deal, the boots on the ground. And so many people called Congress and flooded the phone terminals that they never ended up putting boots on the ground because people were so sick of war at that point, especially with Iraq and Afghanistan being very fresh on everyone's minds. Like that actually changed something. So, I think if there's a targeted call list and, each one of those calls gets 100 people someone's going to respond to those phone calls. I've called Congress before and they've called me back when I've had questions or anything like that. And sometimes senators have called me back. So you'd be shocked to that. I think the response that people would get, especially if it's got the blessing of Lou Elizondo and a Chris Mellon and who else we could try and get. But essentially we've got 3 months to organize this. So that's what brings me to this next thing, which is the Big Phone Home Facebook page. funny enough, I did not make this. The person who made this is Strafe Wilson. I'm forgetting right now where he's from. I want to say Ireland, but I think I'm getting that wrong. But he contacted me this morning and he's like, hey, listen, I heard your interview with Alejandro Rojas. I think it's a great idea. And he put together a Facebook page. So I included that link in the description of the video. So definitely click it, join the Facebook page. We're going to update, what it's about and the date that we're going to be doing things. So I highly recommend checking out this. It's a simple click. So, if you're interested in the big phone home and you want to call Congress with us on May 24th, 2021, then join us here on this Facebook page and you'll get all the updates through here and who's going to join us. I've got a graphic designer working on the logo. So we're doing this. This is going to be, I think I'm taking off trying to bite off a little more than I could chew, but screw it. I'm gonna take on the challenge and see how far we can get. You never know. Maybe we do. I would like to see the 2 reports. Did you hear about the 2 reports that are floating around and that one picture that leaked?
Yeah, I remember we talked about this a little bit. Yeah, we'd like to see those reports.
I would love to see what's in those reports. I would love to see the second picture, but I don't know if that's what we should be asking for. And so that's why I want, the expertise of especially Chris Mellon, because he knows from a defense standpoint exactly what we should be asking for when we make that phone call. There's always the encouragement, hey, make the phone call, call your representatives, but there's never a description of, hey, what should you say? What if you've never called Congress before? What if it makes you nervous to do things like this? We're going to try and walk through all of those emotions here on this channel, Unidentified Celebrity Reviews. So stay tuned, you guys. We've got some big ambitious things coming. So that's the first thing I want to talk about. And then the second thing I want to talk about, did you hear about this interview with George Knapp and Bob Bigelow?
I did not. Please, Lou, show me the light.
Show you the light. Are you making fun of me, John?
I don't think so.
Okay.
not consciously.
Not consciously. Okay, so Bob Bigelow is putting together a study of trying to study the afterlife. That's something I'm very interested in. I really don't even want to talk about it specifically that much, but I found it hilarious that he kind of took a swipe at TTSA. Or not TTSA. He took a swipe at the History Channel's show Hunt for Skinwalker, and made fun of one of the experiments that they spent the whole show on. And basically, they were just firing like model rockets into the sky with balloons and sensors on it, and catching the readings from these sensors as the object comes back to Earth. And it was a really funny experiment, and I just found it funny that he took a swipe at it. And if you haven't seen it, it's on this video. It's at 23:28. I could play this, but I don't think you guys will hear it because I don't have an extra speaker hooked up to it, so I don't want to waste too much time. But I thought it was funny. But if you want to check that out, please do, because I thought it was pretty funny. But have you watched that show, Hunt for Skinwalker?
I've not. Is it good?
No, I didn't enjoy it very much. I thought it missed the mark on a lot of things. But yeah, so we could talk about that a whole another day. But I mean, essentially, they've got the head of security making scientific decisions on the show. It was quite strange. And the gentleman who bought the ranch is like this eccentric billionaire who likes showing people how rich he is with his Lamborghini and helicopter. It's just a very reality, in your face, flashy show. And it just wasn't very good. It was kind of disappointing, but you could see my review of every single episode if you want. It's in a playlist in my archive. So please check that out. All right, John. So let's get to what we are here to talk about. And that is President Dwight D. Eisenhower meeting with aliens. There's stories about him meeting with aliens and seeing a display. And I learned a lot about it. I listened to Ryan Sprague's podcast because I just wanted to do a little bit of research, but I don't know a lot about this. And I know you have some opinions on it. So, and you know, things that you've come across. So I wanted to get your opinion and sort of, you know, just lay the information out on the table and let's just dissect it and have fun with it and see what we could come up with. So how do you want to get started with your Eisenhower report? What do you got?
Okay. Well, thank you all for coming to my Dwight. I like how you keep saying the Dwight D. Eisenhower report.
Yep.
Okay, so let's stipulate this, right? One, a lot of there's been a long rumored Truman connection to Majestic 12, the UFO control group created within the government, because Truman was president in 47, I believe. And check me, somebody fact check me, but I believe that Truman was
sounds right.
He was integral to creating MJ-12, and Eisenhower was his chief of staff for the Army chief of staff. So, and a lot of people have long believed that the Roswell crash was handled by Army intelligence. And so the idea that Eisenhower was the Army chief of staff under Truman when MJ-12 was set up and when Roswell happens, and then the crashes in 48, and there's a lot of crashes at that time, obviously, and sightings. So the idea that Eisenhower might be in this network is, to me, plausible. There's also another story of Eisenhower being aboard I guess a naval vessel in which he saw a UFO. And there's someone, it's like sort of my dad was with Eisenhower on some ship and they saw a UFO for like 10 minutes hovering above them. And Eisenhower said, we're going to keep this under a hat and not talk about it. That's a little preamble. Now, here's what I will say up front to people, right? I am sort of I'm like this is like a telephone game where a bunch of people are playing telephone about these stories. So I'm going to first direct people to like some more firsthand type accounts. Okay. So you probably came across in your research this gentleman, Paul Blake Smith, maybe. And he wrote a book that came out at the end of last year. And we'll refer to my notes here, but it's called President Eisenhower's Close Encounter.
Yeah, that's exactly the podcast I was listening to. Brian Sprague wrote the foreword to his book and just did a podcast with him. So yeah, the sort of central part of that was this golf trip that he took out to, I think it was Arizona or Nevada. It was Nevada. He took a golf trip out to Nevada when he always played in Augusta.
We're so close. Close.
Go for it. Yeah.
No.
My camera's going, at least on my end, let's go nuts. I don't know how it's going on your end, but I apologize if that's bothering you.
It's okay. It's catching up. It's like speeding up to catch up.
Yeah, it's weird.
Okay, so Paul Blake Smith, he's got this book, President Eisenhower's Close Encounter. You can get it on like Amazon Kindle for a couple bucks. But you could also listen, like I did and like Lou did, to a bunch of podcasts he's done. And essentially the story is that famously the story was that Eisenhower had a tooth problem and while he was in Palm Springs, California, to golf in Palm Springs, and this tooth problem was allegedly used as a cover for him to go meet with aliens at Edwards Air Force Base, which was then known as Muroc Air Force or Muroc. Now, Paul Blake Smith says that his research has shown that the Eisenhower tooth event happened the night of the 20th, and this UFO event actually happened the night February 19th, 1954. And so they're separated in his story. Now the interesting thing, and I'll bullet point, then maybe you can zoom in a little. the interesting thing is that there are multiple people who say they were involved or saw this Eisenhower meeting with aliens at what is now Edwards Air Force Base in California, February 19th, 1954. There are also multiple people who seem to confirm that there was an event with some sort of a disc, multiple discs, at Holloman Air Force Base, approximately February 19th, 1955. So there are two events within a span of a year in which Eisenhower is rumored to have made some kind of contact. Now, there's differing information about which aliens at which contact, at which, and also a large rumor associated with this is that he signed a treaty. And sort of like the mainstream ufology story has always been, good guy aliens offered to like save the planet if he disarmed his nuclear weapons, and offered to give like, free energy and stuff like that, but he didn't want to disarm. And then bad guy aliens, and again, this is just the story, then said, well, we'll give you technology as long as, and you don't have to disarm, but you just got to let us do some abductions and do some sampling, but we'll give you a list of all the people that we abduct.
Right. See, now, like, this is where I have the issue with this story.
I'm
all right. Yeah. No, I understand. No, I understand. But this is why I wanted to talk about it, because I want to try and dissect this. Why would any alien presence that has the ability to travel the stars ask us permission to do anything? Like, why would they ask who gives a shit who the president of the United States is? What does that have to do with why they're there? Like, that's my biggest beef with this story. Do you have a good response for that?
I mean, I don't feel like I have to have a good response to that because it's, I mean, this is parts of the story that I think there are no contemporaneous or afterwards past witness accounts that directly talk about this treaty that I've come across. Now, I know the treaty stuff is like out there, but there are people. There's a guy named Gerald Light who was one of 4 people who allegedly was brought to this first encounter. Like, this was something where the government's like, oh, okay, we're going to have this meeting. Obviously, we're going to fly Eisenhower out there. This isn't like a surprise. We're going to bring him out to Palm Springs and we're going to zip him over to Edwards. They invited 4 people, and one of whom was the bishop in Los Angeles. And there's another tangent story I'll bring up about him because I think he is interesting evidence. But the other of whom is this guy, Gerald Light. And he is like a metaphysical kind of scientist, but kind of, a little bit in the uncharted territory, if you will,
of science.
Yeah.
Do you remember where he studied?
This is a very easy. We can pull this up real quick, right? But as I'm doing that, I'm gonna, and there's a long Gerald Light quote here. So let me see if I can pull this up here. So
yeah.
All right. So Light wrote a letter, and this is what his letter says. When we were allowed to enter the restricted section, I had the distinct feeling that the world had come to an end, for I have never seen so many human beings in a state of complete collapse and confusion as they realized that their own world had indeed ended with such finality as to beggar description. The reality of other plane aeroforms is now and forever removed from the realms of speculation and made a rather painful part of the consciousness of every responsible scientific and political group. During my 2 days visit, I saw 5 separate and distinct types of aircraft being studied and handled by our Air Force officials with the assistance and permission of the Etherians, as he calls them. I have no words to express my reactions. It has finally happened. It is now a matter of history. I will leave it to you, to your own excellent powers of deduction, to construct a fitting picture of the mental and emotional pandemonium that is now shattering the consciousness of hundreds of our scientific authorities and all the pundits of the various specialized knowledge that make up our current physics. In some instances, I could not stifle a wave of pity as I watched the pathetic bewilderment of brilliant brains struggling to make some sort of rational explanation which would enable them to retain their familiar theories and concepts. I shall never forget those 48 hours at Muroc.
Okay.
So this is a letter from Gerald White, who is supposedly one of the 4 people who was brought to this meeting. And this is dated April 16th, 1954.
Okay.
So a little bit over a month and a half, or almost 2 months later.
And Mr. Light's credentials, does that? I would just want to know where he studied. I mean, he's a scientist. I mean, if he's a Harvard scientist, I mean, it's a big difference than if he's a, Chico State scientist. But
Southern, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, Southern, no, yeah, I don't quite have it. Yeah, Southern California metaphysical teacher. I'm sure though we can find this is something that's easily sort of attainable. But yes.
So he's got a letter that he sent to
a friend.
Okay.
I mean, I guess here's what I'm saying. This is a story that's come out in piecemeal form. So a big witness who claimed to be involved was I believe an Air Force pilot in 82. Okay. And it's like, well, man, it's 82. What's that? Almost 40 years or almost 30 years later, it becomes like harder to believe when you don't have the contemporaneous documentation. But the fact that this letter does exist that was sent, 2 months after the fact is an interesting addition to this story. There are many other parts, right? I mentioned Bob Dean the last time. He's a command sergeant major in the Army, was stationed in Paris at Supreme Allied Headquarters, read the 1962 assessment on aliens that was made by NATO. And he says that the Bishop McIntyre from Los Angeles, who was there, was instructed not to talk about this, as were all the people. But nonetheless, the bishop flew straight to the Vatican and informed the Pope.
So they had a bishop there when this meeting went down?
Yes, according to, again, I'm merely an avatar.
Yeah, no. I get it. No, I'm just asking the question. I just want to make sure that I get the story right.
Yeah, no, you're right. Okay. Supposedly at this airfield, in addition to many other people, there's a person who claims that they were like a test pilot who was an expert in maneuverability and in metallics, and that he was brought in to observe. I don't have his name. The 4 people who supposedly were brought in as like the 4 ringers from different points of academia were Winthrop Allen, a journalist, James Francis McIntyre, the bishop Catholic head in LA. Franklin Winthrop Allen was the journalist. James Francis McIntyre, the bishop, Edwin Norse, an economist, and Gerald Light, a metaphysical scientist. So you have a metaphysical scientist, an economist, a religious bishop, and a journalist, which is an interesting sort of like, I don't know, the 4 wise men of American media, I don't know, culture.
But wait a second. Okay. So why would, I can understand a bishop. I can understand a metaphysical scientist. What was
an economist and a journalist?
Okay. Economist. I guess now that I'm thinking about it, why would you need an economist there? But beyond that, why would you have a journalist there? Well, why would you trust a journalist to witness those events and not say something to everyone he knows?
Well, if you're going off of the Carl Bernstein model from his famous Rolling Stone article in which he said hundreds of journalists were being directly controlled by the CIA. If they asked this journalist to be there, I would assume it's because he already had a working relationship with intelligence or the military and knew how to toe the line. I'm
okay,
speculating.
Right, but again, why? Why have him there?
Well,
just to document it?
Well, no.
I mean,
Lou, I think the question of that is the secondary question or answer to that is the people who were there assumed that this event would be publicized shortly thereafter, and so the idea of having a journalist there, when the idea of a cover-up was happening, but that some people thought, well, maybe we will talk about this, to me is not insane, but I understand your point.
Yeah, I just, man, it just seems, I'm just trying to put myself in the sort of the shoes of the military, and we have this top secret meeting for the first time ever. We're meeting a group of extraterrestrials. And we haven't even gotten into what them and Eisenhower have talked about. We're talking about. I mean, we brushed on it, but this supposed top secret meeting, it just seems like to bring a priest and a journalist and an economist. I can understand maybe a metaphysical scientist. It's a risky move. It's a super, super risky move to trust those people, even if they are military. And especially if they thought that the idea was the information was going to come out, shortly after the event. And then it never did. And then to sort of hold on to that secret for almost your whole life. I don't know. It seems like, for me, it doesn't fit.
Well, according to the limited, admittedly, research I've done, which is why I'm trying to direct people to other sources that have much more intensive research. But according to the limited research I've done, Gerald Light writes a letter 2 months later, so he doesn't keep his mouth shut. And James McIntyre goes straight to the Vatican and tells the Pope, who, may or may not then have instituted a bunch of Vatican intelligence gathering based off that knowledge. So people are talking afterwards. But I don't know how that response sits with you.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I just feel like it would have leaked a lot sooner than that if they had those kind of folks just sitting around watching, basically the end of Close Encounters of the Third Kind happen right in front of them. I mean, I'm curious to know, how close were they? Were they able to hear the conversation, or were they just, sort of, in the stands just watching from afar?
I don't have that information. There is, there's the general stories are that in the second meeting in 55 at Holloman, Eisenhower walks into a UFO and spends 45 minutes in there talking. This meeting, the story is that I would assume in an aircraft hangar, they met, and that they did a demonstration of their crafts, and even a demonstration of some holographic cloaking. And so now it's the John live stream. Lou's going to be back in a second.
I'm still here. I'm just trying to fix this camera. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. No, go fix it. I was just enjoying the moment here.
Yeah. It's your show. But no, continue.
Well, so I want to keep trying to pepper in stuff that people can look up themselves. So I mentioned this guy, Paul Blake Smith, who wrote this book, right? Which you can research, and you can also listen to him talk about it, because he sort of was an amateur guy who saw this stuff on Ancient Aliens and had heard the story for decades, and then decided, I'm going to do a bunch of research and put a whole book together. And so there's a bunch of different disparate details in his book that I'm not able to bring forth right now, which could include more contemporaneous accounts back in the 50s. So that could be like some news story about it or some speculation, because I do remember him saying that there was speculation as early in the 50s. I can direct people for the 1955 Holloman incident to look up Art Campbell, who is a researcher who's done a lot of work there. And there's a really good video on that on UFO TV on YouTube called President Eisenhower's Secret Meeting with ETs in 1955, The Real Story. And that's got some really interesting multiple witness testimony about the 1955 encounter, where he came to Holloman. It was top secret. He addressed people at the base. And, one story is of the daughter of someone stationed at Holloman who saw the UFO there at the same time that Eisenhower was there. And another time was a man who was stationed at Holloman who was walking behind two men the day Eisenhower was there and listening to them talk about the disc and about other things, including Roswell. And I think it's worth mentioning, just because I kind of gave a preface about Eisenhower's connection to the Army and under Truman during the Roswell era and leading up to this. I find that the Philip Corso story is a really, really engaging aspect of this history. Do you have any opinion? I can go into it. I will go into it, but I assume you probably have some pushback about Philip Corso.
Well, yeah. When you look up the history of fiber optics and you see that it was a female who invented fiber optics, and you read her story and how she came up with it, it just sort of steals that inventor's thunder a little bit. Look, the idea of transferring information on a beam of light seems just very alien tech to me. And that's wild. But then when you dig into it a little bit and you see that, oh no, there was a lot of research done into fiber optics, and really fiber optics was discovered a long time ago. It actually is not new technology. They just with like a lot of new technology, they didn't know how to apply it. They had nothing to apply it to, so they put it on the shelf, and then DVDs come out, and then all of a sudden you've got a better way to transfer digital information from your player to your television, or information from one place to another. It's now in everyone's home. Somebody, you probably have fiber optics something. So that's, I haven't read Corso's book. It's a book that I've got to get into. So I'm speaking out of not knowing a ton of knowledge, just the interviews that I've seen with him, and sort of the digging into his story that other shows and podcasts have done. And so that's I guess my feeling on him is that, I think a lot of these deathbed confessions or things like that, when I dug into Roswell, same thing. It would be a very hard thing to have witnessed what they claim to have witnessed and hold that on as a secret. But it also would be a very hard thing if your boss told you, this is the story you're going to tell, because this is what we want people talking about, because we don't want them talking about a weather balloon that can listen in on atomic bombs going off in Russia. We want people talking about UFOs, because we don't want that tech out there. So, you know what, Corso, Jesse Marcel, this is the story you guys are going to tell. And they had to tell their families. They had to tell, news reporters. And I think that can eat at you just as bad as holding on to a secret that is as fantastic as, UFOs crash landing or recovered bodies or recovered tech that we've back engineered. I think that's just my feeling that a lot of these especially these stories that come out of the atomic age and the Cold War, the height of the Cold War. I think disinformation is so rampant in those times that it just wouldn't shock me that both of those guys are just playing good soldier. They're just doing what they're told, and they're repeating the story over and over and over and over and over again until they're dead. And I think that eats away at your confidence, because now you've got a whole family that believes this. You've got, you know, I don't know. It's just like I said, like like if you do some of the research on some of the tech that he says that was reverse engineered, and you find the real people who are really behind putting in the work and finding those things, it's kind of, it doesn't speak well to what he's saying. I'm not saying that it's not possible. Look, I want to believe it. I want it to be true. There's no doubt about that. I'm for sure, but it's, unfortunately, it's just word of mouth. And as well as I do that, we've played that game telephone in an improv workshop where one person says a word or a phrase and then they whisper it to the next person. By the time you get to the end, it's a completely different word. That happens with stories. That happens with memories, so it's tough for me to just be like, this has got to be true, or this is a conspiracy at the highest levels, because how could it not be? I just you see, does that make sense?
Well, look, it does make sense, but here's what I'll say, which is that the Philip Corso story, he claims to have been stationed at Fort Riley, Kansas, and the Roswell debris came through, and he was the duty officer that night, and he opened up a container and saw a alien. That is not necessarily, that story is a firsthand story, and that's not necessarily dependent on the chronological creation of these technological inventions, like you're saying. Now, you go to the point of like, how do we trust the veracity? Why would people talk now? His story is that he worked during Eisenhower. He worked in Eisenhower's National Security Council under General Trudeau, and he was put on the foreign technology desk, and he was disseminating what was alien technology accrued by MJ-12, which they just called the group, and disseminating it to different corners of American industry, private industry, or military industrial development. And the deal was that they would let the government have a piece of the action, or the military have a piece of the action, as they use this new tech to develop things. Right. Now, I don't think that necessarily precludes some of these developments then being taken by other people, and other people making their own inventions on top of them. But I do think that in general terms, the idea that we made a huge jump in terms of like the integrated circuit board and this kind of thing in the mid 20th century and leading into the second half of the 20th century is interesting. And okay. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to show you this one thing, just because I've just recently did, the History Channel did a 3-part, 6-hour deep dive into Roswell. And this is something that I want to share with you. And I didn't know this. So Jesse Marcel actually had said this in an interview, I believe in 1980, but I had never, ever, ever heard this description before in my life. So the story is that Jesse Marcel II said that when his dad brought in the materials from the crashed object at Roswell, that they looked like an I-beam, like the letter I, like a typical construction beam. And within these beams of course they were very light, they were unbreakable, all those things that we hear about it. And within this I-beam, there is an inscription, almost like a hieroglyphic inscription, like you see here. But what I had never heard, and Jesse Marcel said that no, he got it wrong. It was not an I-beam. He said it looked more like wood. Those were his exact words. And this was a drawing that somebody made based off of his description. And he confirmed that this was almost exactly what it looked like. And, dude, like it's wood. It's wood. That is exactly what a weather balloon is made out of. How could, like, this is why I think.
Well, let's just pause. Let's just pause right here because
right. Well, but hold on. Let me finish this slide. This is why I think that when stuff like this is said, and it's put into art form like this, it's essentially a description of what he said. And this is the again, we got to remember who we're talking about here. Jesse Marcel was, an encryption officer at the first atomic nuclear base on the planet in the United States. And he said it looked like wood. Like, this is why I think that there are secrets that these guys are holding that they can't reveal because they're being that, yes, sir, good soldier, I'm following orders. Hey, that weather balloon, it's a UFO. That's what we're going to call it. And then we're going to retract it. I mean, they had a plan for this. It was almost like a playbook. And he was the victim of that playbook. Something crashed. They had to explain it. They gave it a crazy story. And then he was the face of that crazy story for 60 years. Like, to me, this is, I'm not saying this is the end all be all proof, but when you say it looks like wood and you draw it and it looks like wood and you describe it that looking like wood, and then nobody really talks about that aspect of the story. It's just like, come on, like, we need to discuss this part of it. And for me, it's like it's important. It's what do you think about that image? Is that am I being an asshole? Am I being too hard? Like, I want answers just like anybody else, but I also believe that the military is a lot smarter than people give it credit for. And I think, like a magician, look at what my hands are doing. It's sort of like, that's what it is with this topic. And they use this topic to cover up what they're really working on, what they're really doing.
So, I mean, I think, I don't really have a comment on it looks like wood. What do you think of this picture? Okay. What I do have a comment on is, if you're going to say that this is all like that, the 1995 or whatever report was like actually truthful, that like, yeah, it really was just a top secret Project Mogul balloon and they didn't want to tell you about the balloon. Like, if that is your perspective, then you're negating the idea that there was wreckage found across like multiple hundreds of yards of distance, and that multiple trucks were filled with wreckage.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you know how long a mogul balloon was?
I don't know how long
it was. Longer than the Washington Monument. That's how long those balloons were. That's a lot of material, John, that you're sending up straight with a lot of instruments on it. And some of the paintings and pictures that these instruments look like had a very disc shape. It's just, for me, no one has ever found any anomalous metal out there. No one has ever brought in anything other than the testimony. Unfortunately, again, this is the thing, and Rodrigo makes this point. Look, all of these stories are important. They're important to the lore, and I think with these stories and these testimonies, we can start to build patterns out of them, and then those patterns can be applied, hopefully scientifically, if we can, in some way, if we ever get a real study on this stuff. But he's right. Like, there's no physical evidence. There's nothing.
I just think that, like, it's a little bit, I think that your thesis doesn't exactly hold water in terms of, like, it makes no sense to announce it as a flying disc and then the next day say, no, it was a weather balloon.
Sure, it does.
But what I'm saying is, if your theory is this is disinformation to cover up the existence of this high altitude weather balloon, and there's no reason for them the next day to then come out and say, no, it was a weather balloon, and look, here are the scraps. Now, your point is like, those were fake scraps because the real weather balloon was different. I just think like, in the same way that like the UFO is implausible in your scenario, like I think this scenario is also a little implausible. Now, I understand exactly what you're saying, and I'm not saying that you're not making points that they're sound, but we are then ignoring the fact that we have video and pictures and personal testimony of discs all around this time. And so the idea of a disc crashing is not actually unfounded, given, all these other images around that time period of all kinds of different discs and sightings of Foo Fighters throughout the World War II era. So I'm just saying, like, it's not completely implausible that a disc is there. And it's not implausible that they would try and do the inverse cover-up that you're describing, which is, no, we don't want to say that we have a disc. Let's flip it and say it's a weather balloon as our cover story. I think both are plausible. And I just want to make one more point, which was that you had talked a lot about like why people would talk in deathbed confessions and stuff. And Corso talked because General Trudeau died, and he had made a pledge to Trudeau that he wasn't going to talk about any of this stuff while Trudeau was alive. In the same way, the Air Force dude who came out in '82 and talked about being at the Muroc Edwards Air Force Eisenhower UFO meeting, he said he's coming out because almost everyone he knows who is involved in it is dead. And right before he came out, General Nathan Twining died. And Twining was obviously a big guy in ufology, and he had this famous memo where he's saying the UFO phenomenon is real and not fictitious. And so I don't know, is that Twining memo a part of this disinformation campaign?
Just to back up some of what you just said there. I mean, when Jesse Marcel came out and did his first interview in the late 70s rather, and he had this, it was on In Search Of, that was hosted by Leonard Nimoy. That was his first big interview about Roswell. And that's what sort of relaunched the lure of Roswell. And when he came out, a lot of the other very important figures that worked on that base that were still alive at the time came out and backed up his story. So it's not just one guy. And in regards to Foo Fighters, you're right. Like World War II planes and World War I planes, we're seeing Foo Fighters throughout the wars. And again, I'm not denying that something's not there. I'm just saying that, again, like I'm not saying machines can't fail, but if you've created a machine that can traverse the universe at the speeds that we think that they're achieving, or the engines that are warping them through time and space to appear wherever they want, whatever the engine format is for these things, it does. I mean, for me, I don't think the odds of something like that crashing are very high for me. And even if, let's say it's true, it did crash and we did recover it, I think that tech would be so far beyond our understanding that we would have a really hard time back engineering something like that. I could be totally wrong. I could be totally off. I hope I'm wrong. Like, again, I hope I'm wrong. But it is, and then to sort of answer your point on why would the government come out with a story first and then the next day retract it. I think the government is a lot better at cloak and dagger than you think. You know, this is the same government, and forgive me, I'm forgetting the name of the hotel, but they put a top secret military bunker under a public hotel that houses Congress in case a nuclear weapon strikes. And they did that in broad daylight, and it was a secret military bunker for the entire life of this hotel. Like that, they are good at that, man. And I just feel like it's a little disrespectful to our military. It's a little sort of like, oh, you know, like they don't have the brains to pull off a disinformation campaign like of that level. And then going back to Majestic 12, I'm just trying to hit your hold on, wait. Let me finish this point on Majestic 12. Majestic 12 was, you know, something that Richard Doty pushed, and Richard Doty is a known disinformation agent from the OSI. Like he drove someone to a mental asylum based off of the lies that he got somebody following. Like that's a real story. And he would always reference Majestic 12, and eventually he said that Majestic 12 is not accurate. It's not a real document. Those are not real things. But then again, on the flip side of that coin, he's a liar. Look, I'm trying to play devil's advocate. You know, this is why we're talking about it. I'm going around in circles, but I'm trying to give arguments for both sides as I'm talking about it. But the flip side of that is that Stanton Friedman thought that the Majestic 12 documents were legit.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you fact checking yourself in real time. You're like, he's a fucking liar, and so listen to what he said. And look, and the documentary about Doty, I forget the name of it, that was on Netflix, is really cool.
Yeah, it's it'll come to me in a second. I did a review on it.
But yeah, like, okay, so I forget the thing that you were saying right before MJ12 that I was trying to interject.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I was saying, yeah.
Well, it's okay. But so here's the thing about the story.
Rajman. That's it. Rajman. Thank you.
Rajman. The MJ12 story, you have, like I said, more than just Richard Doty promoting it. And yes, Stanton Friedman has gotten behind it. Obviously, there are other people who've gotten behind it. You may have your doubts of Philip Corso, but he was there. He would know. He was in the NSC. He's not some like crook. He's not some kook. Like,
right.
If you dismiss Philip Corso, that's your right. And if you find things that you disagree with or think that are implausible, that is absolutely fair. But you can't say that he wasn't right in the thick of it. And so I think you have to give him some a hard look.
Well, I agree, but I also think just because he's in the position, he's in the right seat to see it. I don't think if Richard or if Philip Corso in what year are we talking?
Late 50s.
Okay, in 1958 came across something that looked like fiber optics. I don't think he has the expertise to look at that and decipher what kind of technology that is. That's all I'm saying. Like, if he picked it up off his desk and he shined a light on one end and then he saw a light come out the other, that would be crazy in 1958. But if that was invented, if somebody had already established that tech and he saw it, maybe he just wasn't in on that part of the whatever program they're running.
Look, it's apples and oranges, okay? Because no one expects a military commander high in the army to know the technical details of these kind of things. What I'm arguing is it's plausible that he would have had the security clearances and the access to be briefed by people who did have the scientific background and their own clearances to engage and study this technology.
I can't argue that. I can't argue that.
And so, yeah, so I'm not like, again, and let me just try while we're here, just to make a couple other name drops about this subject. If people are like, hey, I'd like to know more about this stuff. Right. So, there is an interesting article in the Washington Post that was published February 19th, 2004. So that's 50 years, 50, to the day of this first alleged Eisenhower meeting. And obviously we know the Washington Post is a, what we would describe as like the mainstream media, so to speak.
Right.
And this is an article by Peter Carlson, and it's all about Eisenhower meeting UFOs in this event. And it's essentially saying, like, did it happen? It's unproven. Some people think this, blah, blah. But it's very interesting on the 50th anniversary to have that article. It doesn't mean anything. It's just interesting. And it's something, it's like Ike and the Extraterrestrials or something. It's an interesting article to read if people are interested. Some other people can look up. So Michael Salla, the UFO researcher, he quotes this guy, Charles Suggs. And I don't know if Suggs is like the son or the father, but I guess he's interviewed the son of a former naval commander who says that he was there in the 54 encounter. And so maybe it's like Charles Suggs and Charles Suggs Jr. But he describes two white-haired Nordics with pale blue eyes, colorless lips, who met with Eisenhower. And they claim to be from another solar system, 7 to 8 foot tall humanoids, communicated telepathically. And
I'm sorry, I was gonna ask, but in Paul Blake Smith's book, he described that the beings were very similar to humans. They were looked exactly the same with small differences.
Did he have in the book the ears on the top of the head?
I didn't read the book, but he didn't mention that in any of the the podcasts I listened to with him in it. But I don't know. I just wanted to ask you about that because that's
so this description is completely human, but it's describing white hair and very tall.
Right.
It's saying white hair, pale blue eyes, colorless lips, very tall. I mean, that's essentially human. And there's another guy, Don Phillips, who describes seeing or reading briefing documents that mention the Eisenhower meeting with aliens. And he says the documents note that it was filmed. And so part of this story is that there are these films somewhere. There is an apocryphal or maybe true, maybe not true part of the story where some of the film cameras malfunctioned because of the technology. But people can look into, the Charles Suggs story, the Gerald Light letter, Art Campbell's work. And like I said, there's a UFO on demand on YouTube, President Eisenhower's secret meeting with ETs in 1955. That's got a couple different angles on that. Timothy Good, also, who's a really great UFO researcher and author, he is quoted the Earl of Clancarty, or Lord Clancarty, who was a member of the House of Lords in Britain, who did research and interviewed a British test pilot who was supposedly there. And all I'm saying is, and I mentioned Bob Dean earlier, he had read the 1962 NATO assessment. So when he comes out and he's the one who says that Bishop McIntyre went straight to the Vatican, and he's the one who says that this meeting happened.
And he was part of NATO, you said?
Yeah, he was a command sergeant major in the Army, but he was stationed at the Supreme Allied Command NATO headquarters in Paris, where a cosmic top secret assessment was done on the UFO issue in 1962 because of the flyovers. And so he says, he's contributing to this information. There's also a guy named Henry McElroy Jr., who is a former representative, U.S. representative from New Hampshire, who said he saw a document in his time in Congress that there was a brief for Eisenhower about the continued presence of ET beings, and that a meeting could be arranged as appropriate. And he, so again, there's a bunch of different angles coming at this, and we don't have the video, right? We don't have the hard evidence. But I think that there's a lot of interesting information. There's also the story that 10 years, so we have February 19th, 54, around February 55 in Holloman. Then supposedly 10 years after the first event, LBJ goes to meet Eisenhower in Palm Springs on the 10-year anniversary, right around that same time. Now, some people have said there was a 10-year agreement. Maybe this could have been some ratification event. But again, this is all speculation, as a lot of this is. But I'm trying to give people threads that they can pull on if they're interested. There's also a movie version of this event, which you may have heard Paul Blake Smith talk about, but it's called The 11th Green. And it's a movie by Chris Munch. And it came out recently. I think it's like a VOD movie. And it stars Campbell Scott, George C. Scott's son, who's an actor who has been in a ton of stuff, but was in House of Cards memorably. And it's all about him chasing this Eisenhower story. And It's like a fictionalized dramatic movie about this.
Okay. I definitely want to check that out.
Yeah. I mean, let me do this if I can, Lou. I want to tell one story and show a video clip.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
like a presentation here. And again, I appreciate everybody who's hanging around and watching. And
oh, for sure. Yeah, Justin, Rodrigo, Midnight Piper, all you guys been chiming in with some really great stuff. So thank you so much. I know there's 80 of you guys out there. And just by the way, I think we're going to try this again. But the last live stream I did solo. And we had actually people come into the chat or into the show here with us and ask questions. We only had one caller, but hey, I thought it was fun. He was all the way from Denmark, so one of our earliest fans. So if you want to be part of the show, you got a question for me or for John, hold on to it, and I will give the link to invite you here with us so you can join us in the show. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, go for it, John. What do you got?
Okay, well, let me also. I'm bad at like looking at this chat because I'm trying to. Some questions pop up and then disappear. But someone was just saying that the Corso was only a lieutenant colonel. Completely true, and they're saying he's not high ranking. There it is.
Yep.
My point was that he was working for the National Security Council, so. He ostensibly, though he's not a 4-star, 5-star general, whatever is, top rank admiral, etc. He is in the, he has the access. He has the clearances. So that's a good point that it's not that he is like at the the highest echelon of the advancement in the military, but at least in the 50s, he had those clearances. That's a story. But I would just say that some people are probably familiar with the story of Robert Emenegger. And he was promised. Okay, fair enough. Yeah. So he was promised that he would be given real UFO footage to include in a documentary. So this is a famous documentary, UFOs Past, Present, and Future, narrated and hosted by Rod Steiger from The Twilight Zone. And Rod Sterling, I'm sorry. And they were told by the government, we're going to give you real UFO footage to put in this UFO doc. And the UFO doc is great. It's got a lot of old classic stories. It's got J. Allen Hynek interviews, and then at the last minute they withdrew the footage, and instead they did a sort of cartoon sketches of a hypothetical landing at Holloman Air Force Base, which again dovetails with this alleged story. But even within their final film, even though their story is that they never got the footage, they inserted a couple seconds of a UFO clip during this final montage. And some people think that that is a real UFO clip, and that, you know, they were only given, that was just my water, and they were only given a couple seconds of it, but not the full footage that they were promised. Because this scenario they describe is like alien, or, you know, UFO lands, aliens come out. This is like a diplomatic sort of thing. The full or larger clip that's accessible online of the short clips that are included at the end of this documentary is what I wanted to share.
All right.
So let's see if I can make this work. Okay.
As you're doing that there, I wanted to, this was a good point by John Lind here. Second, he was an Army lieutenant colonel who claimed to have tons of access to primarily United States Air Force programs. I just don't see how this is remotely possible, being his status as a lieutenant colonel.
And was he in the Army or the Air Force? I don't remember now.
Well, according to him, he was an Army lieutenant colonel.
Okay.
So why would he have access to United States Air Force programs is the question. He doesn't understand how that would be possible.
Well, okay. So maybe it's making me quit Chrome if I want to try and share something. Here, I'm going to send you the link, Lou, to share.
Okay. Yeah. You can send it in, I think, in a private comment, maybe. Yeah, private chat.
If this MJ-12 operating group that he claims he was liaising with, along with General Trudeau, does exist, this operating group is got the core information that spans across. And so if you read his book, he talks about how all the other armed forces are like all sniping along with the CIA to like get the information that the MJ-12 group has. And they've all got their own little pieces of tech that they found, but they're also very curious what's going on in this core group. And so the theory is that he would have access to this core group because of his closeness to ostensibly Trudeau and Eisenhower, who were involved in the upper echelons of the military when this working group was set into motion in the late 40s. And of course, this is a group that's famously got like Vannevar Bush and Detlev Bronk, and there's a list of 12 people who are in this group. Okay, there's the link, Lou. And this is just like, you know, I just think this is a good UFO clip in general, but also given that we're talking about a potential 1955 Holloman encounter, that this was excerpt in a film about a hypothetical Holloman encounter. And the filmmakers were promised from the government a real clip, I think is fascinating. And in the film, they actually say, now let's look at a scenario that may happen in the future or may have already happened. You ever seen this clip?
It looks familiar. Let me watch it through here. Yeah, okay. Yeah, and then that's it. Yeah, I have seen that clip. Dude, the problem, it's kind of like Neil deGrasse Tyson when he just explained, all of these supposed videos of the moon landing, right, and how bogus they were. And the problem is that we have no idea where that video is sourced from. It's intriguing, it's an intriguing thing, but it's a hard thing to use as evidence, because unfortunately, I mean, look, at the end of all of this, video is not going to be good enough, John. It's just not. I do love video. I love pictures because they're sensational. They're fun to look at. Of course, you always want a picture. You always want a video. But like the best info that we're going to get is either going to be hard material, or is going to be, data along the lines of radar tracking information, cockpit recordings, things like that. Testimonies from pilots and fresh testimony, not like 4 or 5 year old testimony where memories change. There was a really great UFO story I covered where a pilot, where he was filming, a rotating object in the sky while he was flying. And it's a great piece of evidence. It's a video. The video's not amazing, but what's being said in the video and what is being done in the video is what's amazing. You've got a captain of a plane and the co-pilot confirming on video with their voices that they just saw a shooting star stop in the sky, and then this thing followed them for 20 minutes, and they're showing the radar on the plane and nothing's popping. I mean, it is absolutely fascinating. But at the end of this, it's just it's not going to be good enough. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not. It's not going to be scientifically for science. It's like a video like that is not going to convince a university to open up a study and use dollars to really look at this. Or
I didn't know that was the threshold. I didn't know that was the threshold.
Well, I mean, that's what we're trying to get to, isn't it? We're trying to get this topic on the table to be taken seriously.
Okay, well, look, let me ask you a question, okay?
Yep.
And I think that the thing that I couldn't remember earlier was just that, you're saying that I'm not giving the government credit, and the envisioning the sort of like, amount of thought that can go into like disinformation and stuff. I actually am giving the government credit. I'm saying that like the government has effectively run this entire disinfo op about the mogul, and they're still running it so well that they've got UFO enthusiasts like you helping them run it for them. And I mean, like, I actually give them a lot of credit because they maintained this cover up in the face of, and this was a good thing I didn't mention, but like 1952, there was a huge UFO flap over Washington, D.C., extremely well known. All these UFOs on radar going super fast over D.C. People are like, why don't they just land on the White House lawn? Well, they practically did in 52. Caused a huge hubbub. There was the biggest press conference since World War II in D.C. to cover it. This was like a big deal in 1952. There are many videos and newspaper clippings and documents you can find about this. And this is not, an invention or up for debate. Now, to talk about how disinfo works, well, I think in 2009 or 10, there's a Politico article about a UFO lobbyist outside of Congress. And the article says, so-and-so UFO lobbyist says there was a big flyover of UFOs in DC in 1952. We asked the congressional archivist or something, and he said, I've never heard of it. Didn't happen. This is in a Politico article where, like, you could have Googled 1952 and seen the Washington Post or equivalent of in the day headlines. And they're literally like, he claims there was something in 52. We asked the guy who runs the custodian of Congress, and he said no. I'm just saying, like, the disinformation that this doesn't exist is so ingrained that, I get it. Like, it could be used often to cover advanced technology that we have. Like, I get it. There may be like, Nazi crafts or all kinds of craft that we're just ascribing to UFOs so people don't ask more questions. But I also think, like, when you look at that video that I had you show, to me, that is an incredibly solid UFO video. And to me, and I'm only going off of my own visual field here, not that it's provable to a congressional committee or a scientific collegiate, study. To me, you could ask, well, is that one of ours? You could ask UFOs past, present, and future. Yes, absolutely. You could ask, is that one of ours? You could ask, is that really, could that be a foreign technology? But like, to me, it's pretty clear that's a silver disc filmed a while ago, and it looks pretty realistic to me. Now, I'm not saying I can't be deceived by the eye, but I just think like that clip is, and the fact that that is excerpt in a documentary from the 70s, where the filmmakers themselves say they were promised by the government real UFO footage. I think that's more persuasive than you're giving credit for. And I'm not arguing that it can open up a collegiate class, but I'm just arguing that in the constellation of this story, potentially of Holloman landings, potentially of Edwards base and landings, potentially inspiring Close Encounters of the Third Kind, I think this is interesting.
I will say this, two things. The first is that if that footage was accompanied by an official statement from the armed forces saying, yep, that's real footage. Yep, that's our footage. Yes, this is a real event. This is the original footage, and maybe they gave us more of it, or because obviously if it was at one point classified information or classified whatever, that excuse can't be used anymore because the footage is really old. So it shouldn't be classified anymore, right? If that was coupled with some sort of, again, some statement from our government that says, yep, that's ours. The second thing I will say, what's the year that footage was released? Late 70s?
Yeah, we can Google it, but yeah, I believe so.
So it would not shock me at the least that we were working on some sort of drones back then. And the problem with this footage is that it's far away. We can't tell what it is. It's amazing. And look, if the government came out tomorrow and said, yeah, this is real, I would have no problem swallowing it and saying, hey, I'm wrong. I got
74.
No, it's 74. So 1974, I mean, you're talking about, the F-117 Nighthawk being probably running bombing missions in 1974. Like, that's a very advanced plane. So this idea of drone technology and possibly filming that drone technology and then giving it to a couple of documentary filmmakers and saying, yep, this is genuine UFO footage.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I can get behind, like, to me, that's a fair question, and I guess, I am left again, not being a believer in the religious sense, but I am left with what I think is a growing preponderance of evidence from a bunch of different angles that that make me think that the phenomenon is real. And so like I am like, I've seen the Carol Rosen clip where Werner von Braun says that like they're going to make the enemy of the ET, and in the same track that they're going to make, state-sponsored terrorism or all these different things that are going to keep people scared. And I know, like, rationally that like some of these have to be reverse engineered or just exotic technology we've just created on our own, drones like you're saying, or maybe flying around one of theirs. Like, there's no proof when you see a Prius driving by that there's definitely a liberal driving it.
Right.
Like, I mean, like, we don't, I'm with you on all these things. I guess I'm just saying that, like, overall, I do think that they're, and maybe, I don't know. To me, and I haven't looked into it as much as you, man, but to me, like, the Jesse Marcel, the guy who was told to hold up the wreckage, like, my understanding is he eventually came out and said, they made me do that. That was not the real wreckage. And so,
yeah, but that could mean, I'm sorry to cut you off, but that can mean a lot of things. They made me hold it up. Yeah, they made me hold it up, which was embarrassing. Again, going back to my point that they embarrassed him and they forced him to stick to that story. But then again, him saying this is not the wreckage I found is true. It's accurate. But just because that's not the wreckage you found doesn't mean that the wreckage that was actually found wasn't the a Project Mogul balloon or whatever. Like it's a true statement at the same time, not really answering the question.
Do you know the Annie Jacobsen hypothesis?
No, please lay it on me.
Well, Annie Jacobsen, former New York Times or former LA Times reporter, wrote a book, I believe it's called Area 51, in which she claims from an Area 51 whistleblower that Roswell craft was actually like Russian human experiments in which they did like Nazi-esque, that they used like Nazi technology to make kids all messed up and look alien and put them in some craft because they were trying to trigger a War of the Worlds response, or not War of the Worlds, or the Orson Welles sort of freak out. They're trying to trigger a freak out as a disinformation tactic. And this is like a complicated thing that like came and went years back in her book. Now, to me, it's like, okay, wow, that's interesting. That's fascinating. I can't completely rule it out, although it's insane, but I got to put that in the constellation of everything else. Like, to me, that's really interesting. To me, the idea that it really was Mogul, I don't know, dude. I mean, like, to me, that seems far-fetched.
Wait a second. So a handmade weather balloon made to listen in on nuclear testing from the Russians during the height of the Cold War is more far-fetched than a intergalactic craft crashing on Earth.
What I'm saying is the idea put forth in the mid-90s in, whatever they called it, Beyond Roswell Reviewed, or whatever I forget what the name of their report was, that the reason why people saw aliens is because they were test dummies. And the reason why people thought it was an alien crash was because this Mogul balloon. The idea that people would think that even a Washington Monument length balloon and test dummies would be the same thing as aliens or UFO, to me, is less plausible than, given all these other sightings and all these other contact events, that maybe, according to different documents, maybe like a Doppler radar did bring down one. I know you had mentioned like how could it crash or whatever, but maybe Doppler radar did bring down one. Maybe, and this was like a Simon Parkes thing, I believe, is maybe it was dropped to seed technology to us for some greater benefit of some other some other group, because they felt like if they could seed this technology to us, then that might make us more gel better, or I don't know, do work for them. I don't know. I'm speculating wildly here. I'm just saying that, like, I don't think that people saw crash test dummies and went aliens.
I think in 1947, people, especially a rancher, has no idea what the hell he's looking at. And I think stories and fantastic things like that, especially on a ranch where very little things happen, very, very big events don't happen often in a small town like Roswell, New Mexico, which is still a very small town. But in 1947, it was even smaller. And they see a bunch of metal and a bunch of weird things and a bunch of instruments that they can't make heads or tails out of. And they go into town and they put it on the sheriff's desk and they say, this is an alien. I saw bodies and this fantastic story. Then the sheriff tells somebody else, and then that person tells. I mean, this is what happened with the story. It got out of control super quick, and then you couple that with a news report that's retracted the next day. I understand what you're saying, but for me, and again, just I would love to see a college course taught on this topic. And the only way we get to that level is if we have something much harder than a story or hearsay or speculation, or, you know, again, these stories are almost 70 years old. These are really, really, really old stories. And Rodrigo, I think, made a good point. You know, like what happened in 2017 was a true advancement because it was an official statement along with the footage. It's the first time anything like that has happened. But even so, science can only go far with that footage. Like you can't start again, like even with that footage, even with an official statement, like nobody is saying, hey, let's open up a study on this. Let's see if we can get funding for this. Let's really take a look at this. When and I've listened to probably 6 or 7 podcasts with Avi Loeb by this point. When this object came into our solar system, a Muamua, that is being hailed as a possible alien object, you know, when he went to his colleagues and he's like, look, this is the first interstellar object to ever enter our solar system. Could we please get some instruments on it? And every single one of his colleagues are like, why do we need to do that? No, it can't be alien. Like, and it just basically just left him out in the rain. And he's got the data, he's got the everything to back up that this thing could very possibly be either alien space junk or some sort of alien probe coming into our solar system to check us out. And the fact that you could not get one telescope out of all of the telescopes floating around in Hubble, you couldn't make a phone call to NASA and say, I mean, just the fact that it was the first interstellar object ever recorded by humans, you can get Hubble or NASA or anybody to pay attention to this object. And what's funny is they caught it on the way out. They didn't, unfortunately, they didn't catch the whole thing. But the problem arises is that if something like this happens again, the stigma of this is going to prevent real science from looking at it. And the thing with these stories, the thing with, you know, with all of these, with Philip Corso, with Roswell, with, you know, Eisenhower meeting aliens, like, why would aliens, again, like, that's my biggest question. Why aliens are not going to ask us permission? Like, would we ever ask permission of ants to crush the anthill? Never. Do we ask permission of the, you know, of the jungle life when we're raping the Amazon for resources? No, we go in and we do whatever the hell we want because we're the more powerful. We're the top of the food chain. We do whatever we want. And if you have beings visiting this planet talking to the president of the United States, there's no treaty. This is what we're going to do. Take it or leave it. We don't give a shit.
Well, and I mean, this goes to the point. This is, when you had me on last time, the first question was about this Israeli aerospace and security expert who says that we're part of a galactic federation. Inherent in that statement is that there are agreements and treaties, and assumed is that these groups are at different levels of advancement. And so I know exactly what you're saying. I think it makes sense. I think that there are plenty in the infinite space. There are plenty of advanced life forms that have no desire, need, or will not ask for any sort of permission to do anything. And I can't speculate on hypothetically why these alleged meetings occurred, but I do think that the idea that we were making all of these nuclear tests in the atmosphere and literally ripping apart the fabric of space and time, literally, polluting our planet, along with this like heightened industrial age that is, at least scientifically contributing to a change in ozone and CO2 and etc. It could be that someone might want to communicate to people, quote, in charge of the, at the time, most dominant country on the face of the earth post World War II, and try to get them to pull back on some of this stuff. Now, again, that's just speculation, but I do think like if there are, and we know intuitively based on, like I said, the infinite space, we're not alone. Of course not. And so I'm sure that there is diplomacy, and I'm sure that there is trade, and I'm sure that there is there are people who don't respect those boundaries. And so who knows who these hypothetical people, in quotations, and I'll just say this. I mentioned the thing about the Vatican, that the bishop was brought in. The bishop supposedly went to, I think it was Pope Pius XII, but whoever's the Pope at the time in 54. And then arguably the Vatican has this SIV security force that may or may not have been instigated at that moment. But what I'll say is, in the last 15 years, it's been fascinating to watch the Vatican say, like, they have explicitly come out and said extraterrestrial brothers, and like there's a list of statements that the Vatican's made that pretty much are futuristic and seem to be laying the groundwork for a more blatant and obvious disclosure, so that they would have their backs covered and say, well, we've already incorporated into our dogma and theology this concept.
Right.
Have you ever seen those Vatican things? I'm trying to pull up an old post that I made about that.
I think I actually read that post that but it was a while ago that
I know.
that I may have looked at it. I mean, look, the bottom line is here, neither one of us has the answer to this question, but I also think that if there's, I don't want to quote the name of this society wrong, but the Society for Scientific or Coalition for Scientific Studies on UFOs and UAPs. There was someone in there who asked one of the, professors that is part of that group, something along the lines of, what would it take for you to be convinced that these objects are real? What would it take for you to advocate for a scientific study and putting money and time and resources into this? He said he would need a wing the size of the Smithsonian filled with objects before he ever. And I was like, well, okay, that's a little excessive. I mean, no, you wouldn't need to just maybe one piece, or the radio off the craft, but look, man, that's that. You know what? That is the stubbornness of science, I think, throughout human history. Someone comes out and says the world is round, and science fights it for centuries until, they figure out the math and they catch up to the tech and they're like, oh yeah, the earth is round. I think this is, and I hope I'm wrong on this, but the Occam's razor for me on this is that it's just like fiber optics. We discovered it. We figured something out from a physics standpoint, and we just don't know how to apply it yet. It's just a technology that we are somewhat familiar on how to use because we just stumbled across it, but we don't know how to apply it properly yet. And that's why it's taken so long, years and years and years and years and years for this information to come out. And maybe now is just sort of the beginnings of us maybe starting to get used to the idea that maybe the military does have objects like this.
Yeah, I will. And I agree. And I agree that we're in the throes of, the trickle of disclosure is increasing. It's been trickling out for a long time. Hopefully this drumbeat does intensify. The links or the quotes that I was mentioning are 2008 director of the Vatican Observatory said, quote, as there is a multiplicity of creatures on earth, so there may be other beings intelligent created by God. This does not conflict with our faith. Just as we consider earthly creatures as a brother and sister, why should we not talk about an extraterrestrial brother? It would still be part of creation. That's from 2008, 2009, quote, questions about extraterrestrial life are, quote, very interesting and deserve serious consideration, the Vatican said yesterday as one of its officials presented a summary of its first conference on astrobiology. 2010, the Pope's astronomer, Brother Guy Consolmango, said, quote, any entity, no matter how many tentacles it has a soul. I would baptize aliens if they asked. And 2014, Pope Francis, quote, if, for example, tomorrow an expedition of Martians came and some of them came to us here, Martians write green with that long nose and big ears, just like children paint them. And one says, but I want to be baptized. What would happen? Who are we to close doors? I just think it's interesting. Over the course of the last decade, the Vatican has really, and I guess 13 years, has really started to like lay this groundwork that this doesn't shatter our worldview.
Yeah.
Aliens have souls too. We can baptize it's just, I find that interesting. And also the idea that they were being brought in most likely before, but at least as early, according to the Gerald or the Bob Dean story, as early as 54 from Bishop McIntyre of LA, is interesting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Alejandro Rojas did a really great presentation, dissertation on religion and UFOs, and his sort of theory as to what would happen if UFOs did come and show themselves on a massive level. What would happen to religions and how religions would react. And it's a fascinating conversation or presentation. And essentially he came to the conclusion that religion's pretty much preparing for this. They're ready to go on this. And I don't think, and he didn't think that it would destroy religion or harm it in any real way, because I think religion would figure out a way to connect something like that with God. Yeah, I don't think it'd be very difficult for them to do, and it would probably even bolster their religious beliefs in some ways. So I thought that was interesting. So what I'm going to do right now, because we're kind of winding down a little bit. So what I wanted to do is, in the live stream, I just put in a link for the StreamYard. So if you're interested in calling in, please do so. Use the link. But I will put some rules. I mean, you're not going to get on the show if you're naked. I'll tell you that. Sure. You know, I'm putting a lot of faith in the 8 people that are live streaming right now. So if you're interested in talking to us, you have an opportunity to do so. Please do so. It's a lot of fun. And there was a lot of great points, and I just want to thank Rodrigo, Justin, Midnight Piper. All of you guys have just been putting in some wonderful comments and good points into the discussion tonight. And I thank you so much for hanging out with us and getting weird and interacting with us. And somebody had said earlier in the chat, and I thought this was just a really nice comment, and it was by Midnight Piper. And he says, I like a nice discourse like this. Most hosts just agree to agree. A little passion goes a long way. And that's the whole point. We're trying to approach this with our viewpoints, of course, and our opinions, and passionately, but it's okay to be wrong on this topic. It's okay to be wrong. And truth be told, we're probably all very, very, very wrong on this on some level. Like there's nobody's going to be right. No theory, I think, is going to be 100% on the button. I think, when this does come out, and by the way, there's a StreamYard link. You guys just click it and it'll let you in here. I don't think there's, I can't remember what I was going to say. I clicked my link here and I totally lost my thought. But anyway, nobody's right. And
right or wrong.
And yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think when the truth does come out about this, it's going to be so mind bending that it's going to be really hard to even wrap your head around, because it could just be something I mean, I just love that. I always think of the line in Matrix when they're like, oh, that's weird, I saw that cat again, and they're like, well, what do you mean you saw a cat again? I was like, well, I saw a cat and then I thought I saw it again. Well, was it the exact same cat? Was it similar? Yeah, it was the same cat. Oh shit, like they're here. There's a glitch in the Matrix, like it could be something as wild as that, where I could be hosting a podcast because somebody on the other end of an enormous galactic mouse and computer is is putting me in this chair and telling me to do a podcast because we're doing The Sims right now. You know, like how wild would that be if it turned out to be something like that?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, there's already existing sort of mind bending hypotheses about like, you know, are extraterrestrial craft actually interdimensional? Or are extraterrestrial craft actually from the center of the earth? Or are extraterrestrial craft actually breakaway craft from a Nazi faction or from a breakaway American faction?
Are extraterrestrial craft extraterrestrial?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Or are they drones? Are they our technology? Are they is it are we a part of a simulation? Is everything we know turned on its head? There are many ways in which things could still surprise us about what's happening. So look, I don't my disclaimer is that I love the subject because intuitively I know in an infinite universe there is infinite life. And so I know that that is true.
Yeah.
I don't even think that's like I believe. I think that's
Lex,
obvious.
I gotta send you this link because I have a feeling you haven't seen it. But Lex Fridman, the AI MIT professor, he did a 25-minute breakdown. There you go. He did a 25-minute breakdown of the Drake equation, but he added a whole bunch of variables to it, and it like blew up the Drake equation by like, you know, to the 10th power. And he was being very, very conservative on the numbers that he was plugging into his formula. And it's an inevitability. It is a fact. If we're here, it's somewhere else, because if there's one thing you can just see on this planet, nature repeats itself constantly. But what I wanted to do real quick, because somebody told me that, oh wait, sorry, a lot of Lucifer stuff in here.
I know about the thing they mentioned, that there is a Vatican telescope that they oddly named. That's very weird. I mean, we could also, Lou, if nobody is jumping in, take questions from the chat too.
Sure, yeah, we could do it either way. But I wanted to real quick see if this works. I'm curious if people hear this. But this was the Bob Bigelow clip that I was talking about earlier, where he took a little swipe at the TV show The Hunt for Skidwalker. So let's check out this clip real quick.
You know, we're trying to do something we think is and hope is good for the whole work. For everybody's work. So many people have spent their lives in this field and haven't received much recognition. They've written books, but it's not a field that that attracts masses of people as researchers. And so we're trying to stir the pot and create some excitement. You know, it's better than lighting fireworks and sending up a bunch of balloons. You know, so we're trying to do something.
You hope. Yeah, so that was the comment right there. You know, he basically just took a little swipe at the show. You know, because again, they had done that little stupid scientific study on the show, and he just ripped it apart right there, which I found hilarious. But he also, did you happen to hear his comments on Bob Lazar?
No, what are those?
Okay, so he had said something along the lines. George asked him, I don't know if you knew this, but I didn't. Bob Lazar and Bob Bigelow had actually gone into business together. Did you know this?
No, I didn't.
Midnight Piper here. If you want to call in, my friend, StreamYard link is right there. I just put it in under your comments, so give us a buzz. So he basically said that Bob Lazar, you know, he said, you know, hey, Bob is a smart guy. We went into a business together. I don't think he got into the specifics of the business, but he said basically he gave Bob Lazar a lab, And he came back, you know, a month or 2 months later, and Bob just stuffed the lab with a bunch of furniture. And he's like, okay, get the fuck out of here. but it was like, on one hand, he was saying like how smart he is, but on the other hand, he was like a complete like scam. Like, why would you stuff a lab with your personal furniture? Like, it was such a weird thing, man. I was like, dude, like that just goes to show you how scattered brain and sort of crazy Bob Lazar is. Like, I just, man,
you keep going. you've really like,
I don't like Bob Lazar anymore. I mean, dude, it's a but you know what, man? Again, look, and I don't think I've said this on the live stream, but in this field, it's okay to have a "what have you done for me lately" attitude. And if I find information that tells me that Bob Lazar's full of shit and it's factual and it's backed up and it's credible, that's what I'm going to go with, man. You know, like that's what I'm going to go with. I have to.
Can you turn on me right now?
What do you mean?
I just mean, can you turn on me? Like, can you?
You want me to get? What do you want me to call you full of shit and a liar? Yeah. I can do that. I mean, I could do that. But I mean, dude, like, look, man, we've talked Bob Lazar ad nauseum on this channel, and I've done easily 7 or 8 videos on Bob Lazar, going deep into why I believe what I believe. And you know, it's up to you. I mean, obviously it's up to whoever takes in the information, but all of the only people that truly 100% believe Bob Lazar are George Knapp, and he's the most credible out of the two, and the other person is Jeremy Corbell. Those are the only 2 people that are really, really, really pushing this Bob Lazar story. And even to, you know, a lot of and I've talked to them, George Knapp's colleagues, like this is a blind spot for George. You know, he's presented with these facts, and it's definitely fascinating, Rodrigo. There's no doubt about that. It's a fascinating story, and it wouldn't shock me if it's half truths, you know, but this guy seems to be really slippery when it comes to getting in trouble with the law. I mean, he opened an illegal brothel, didn't get arrested. You know, his school records are missing, which is a strange thing. You know, there's a lot of weird things about Bob that, I mean, look, his website, I'll just go to it right now because to me, it just screams CIA. I mean, like, who has a website like this?
I mean, I'm curious to see a website that screams.
I'll show you. That. I'll show you. Look at this website, dude. Look at this website. This is a supposed really smart guy who is a scientist and an engineer. And this website, bro, this is from 1997. Like, why would you have a website that looks like this in 2021?
Well, I mean, you know, who's to say people's web designing tastes? And I don't know how that is reflective of it being necessarily intelligence. I mean, I do think that like, you know, you can make arguments that all, you know, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole with you, but I will say that, you know, it's always been interesting why they would ask him about his relationship with John Lear in the interview. And it's always been interesting, you know, why they would show him walking by the alien in the room or show him so much so quickly. But like, we don't know how these things operate. You know, I don't know how black projects and compartmentalized projects really operate. And it is possible that somebody who is a savant in their field could be greenlit quickly if they had the approval of someone like an Edward Teller. And so, like, there are things about the story that I think, you know, and again, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but just suffice to say that sometimes I think we miss the forest from the trees because we get so hung up on, like, this thing doesn't make sense for this story, when, like, Philip Corso's book, which you will eventually read, I'm sure, and the interviews, I find him as a personality extraordinarily compelling. And I think his story is incredibly detailed. And we didn't get into the subject of the 2013 deathbed confession to Richard Dolan, the guy who was in CIA, and he was ordered by Eisenhower to deliver a message to Area 51 that they needed to brief Eisenhower on their current progress, or he would send in a battalion to invade Area 51. And that was a clip that I sent you. And that's a 20-minute long Richard Dolan interview with a guy who claims to be dying. And he also says that he had a 40 and 50-year secrecy oath that had expired, which explains why he's coming forward now, both while being sick and also this time has elapsed. But he says explicitly he was sent to S4 while under the employ of the CIA and as a liaison from Eisenhower to tell the people working there ostensibly under the MJ-12 operating group who had stopped briefing and updating him what was going on. And he claims to have seen craft, and he claims to have seen a creature. And that's an interesting deathbed confession that I think plays very sincerely.
Fair. It's fair enough.
Did you?
I'm sure I've seen it. I'm sure I've seen it. But not to cut you off, but we do have a caller. We got somebody who called in. The man. He's labeled as the man, but I have a feeling it's Midnight Piper. But let's bring him in. All right, Piper, you're not naked, right? Nothing's going on. Let me see. Show me what's happening. You don't have a dead body in the background.
Show me.
Show me you have pants on, please.
Show me,
before I let you in the stream. All right, cool. All right, here we go. All right, we can hear you, Dan, the man, Midnight Piper. Welcome to the Unidentified Celebrity Review. Thank you for calling in. What do you got?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me good?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yep,
good,
yep,
excellent.
Yeah. We got the beard. We can hear it all. Fire away.
Nice, man. I don't really have much, I guess. I kind of lean more towards. I think a lot of people really do busy themselves with surviving, paying bills, taking care of their family, working. You have to understand that there are very powerful people in this world that own the majority of this world, and they have web of ties across powerful countries. For those people that don't think that there are secret societies, which is just a byproduct, you might as well call a secret society the mafia. When you're in places and you have resources, when you have power, when you have and you can make big moves that can crash understand that the CIA, all these alphabet agencies like the NSA and the CIA, when you're so powerful that you hide your own tracks, I think the first thing people should consider, just everyday go citizens, is that powerful people that have all the or Soros, like whoever, to an idea that they're there as your servant would be foolish. These big agencies, and this is back to your point, Lou, or well, both of y'all's point, you both got it from different directions. The idea that the military or the CIA would not manipulate you for their own reasons is foolish. Now, you can over speculate on these things and you can run yourself ragged as to why are they manipulating me, but you can look at the Freedom of Information Act on the CIA all day long. They are the most corrupt alphabet agency that this country has ever fucking seen. They have spiked people with LSD. They're the ones that created the terminology conspiracy theorist. Okay.
Well, you're making some amazing points, and I'll back up the point you're saying by just powerful conglomerates. Just look at what happened with the stock market here in the last 3 days with the GameStop. where you have a whole bunch of hedge fund managers betting that GameStop is going to fail and shorting the stock. And then when Reddit readers decide to get together and start buying the stock, it quadruples in value. And now all of these hedge fund managers just lost billions of, some of them millions of dollars. And now they're turning around and they're complaining to the government and they want their money back. They're going to get a bailout. They might get a bailout because they got hoodwinked by everyday trolls, Reddit trolls. So, this idea that
just a coincidence.
Well, what's going to be interesting to see is how they respond to this. What are they going to do? What are they going to limit? Are they going to limit easy trading where anybody could just download an app and do trading however they want? Are they going to, they halted trading on the movie theater stock because they turned around and tried to do it with, I think it was AMC movie theaters. And so I'm interested to see, because like you said, there's very powerful people in this country, and a lot of them reside in Wall Street. Wall Street is going to go for it. Wait, hello, Piper, you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're coming in and out. You're fading in and out a little bit.
I don't know why. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, a little better. Go for it.
I don't want to step across the line into pessimism. That it goes far beyond getting caught up in the details with insider trading and some microtransactions having to do with one NASDAQ deal on Wall Street. I think it is literally connected. All powerful giant conglomerates like Google and Facebook and Amazon and AT&T and fucking Schlumberger, all of it, along behind closed doors.
Yeah.
Things to manipulate you. Do you realize the anthropological studies that can be done on each individual fucking citizen just by looking at their goddamn Google history to know what you can't spill, to know what you can spill, to know your desires, to put you in an algorithm that breaks you apart by age, gender, race, where you're located at in the country. I mean, you've heard of solar storm, I would take it, right? NASA's solar storm? Or I think it was solar wind. I'm sorry. The NSA solar wind. Well, the NSA brought a genius computer.
They brought citizens.
Design a program so we can protect our national securities, where we can have a bot that is constantly scanning geopolitically in other countries for anything that may be considered a national threat to this country. And he goes, sure. And he made it. And they went, thank you. And they turned it against us.
Yeah.
That program is running on every one of you. And it's behind a digital wall called Stellar Wind. Yeah. And I'll go further. So I know that I'm kind of getting off the beaten track about economics and power structures and politics. Just to go way out there, and then we can end the phone call if someone else wants to call in. I typed a comment that said, if you were like some nomad or something walking along the beach with your spear, and all you knew was covering your genitals with a sackcloth and hunting and fishing, and you had your own little primitive language with your mongoloids around you that would hide in a cave at night and light a torch. If you came across a Swiss watch on the beach, would it make more sense to you for you to consider, oh, well, fuck, I guess a volcano exploded and it hit the water so fast that it cooled in such a way that a glassy surface must have crystallized, mingling with metals in such a way that all these intricate gears and everything that comes together makes complete sense, because that is the description of evolution. They say, and I'm just going to go a little bit further here, the idea of scientific non-creationism, philosophically. Now understand, philosophy and science do go hand in hand. The philosophy aspect of science as to bewilder those who were based only in a three-dimensional Cartesian aspect of understanding of where we came from.
Right. Well, I gotta tell you, Midnight Piper, you laid a lot of good points on here, man. Next time though, I'm gonna ask you to call from a Wi-Fi connection because I think a lot of points faded in and out on you. But I caught most of them. John, do you have any thoughts on what Midnight Piper laid out there? I mean, a lot of stuff he said is right. You know, when he's talking about these programs, like he said, they look at your thoughts, your desires, everything you email, everything you send, even the things that you don't send, they can see. You know, an email that you wrote but you didn't send, they can see that, and they're tracking that, and they're looking at that, and they're gathering that data. It's almost like that episode of or really that season of what's that political thriller what we mentioned earlier in the show,
Homeland, or
the Netflix show with Spacey,
House of Cards.
Cards. It is like season 2 of House of Cards, where they have this supercomputer that is able to decipher who people are going to vote for, essentially, and they can use that information to their advantage and target certain things by using certain phrases and things like that. And it's a scary sort of interesting growing pains that we're going through here in the technology revolution, because that's what we're in. We're in a very speedy technological shift here, and it seems like society is having a hard time keeping up with the very loosey-goosey rules of technology, and there's some messy areas there. Yeah,
and there was also there's also a plot line in Homeland. This is why I was saying it, where they someone had an alliance with like a Google type agency. And so they were manipulating search results to affect elections.
Right.
And then that became somewhat of an issue in 2016 with the idea that, Russia was tweaking these different social media things, or Cambridge Analytica, whether they were involved in any foreign powers or not, were tweaking it as well on Trump's behalf. And I'm sure Hillary's people had their own stuff they're working as well. Look, we are definitely, I definitely give a lot of credit to the, to the government for being able to keep here's a distinction I want to make. Okay. Cause I do a lot of independent, personal, for fun research about the JFK assassination.
Mm-hmm.
Because I care a lot about it. I want to know. I think we were denied the truth, and people always say like the government can't keep a secret, right? Or they say someone would have talked.
Yeah,
and yet we have all these people in the JFK assassination and in the alien world who've talked, who've spoken, who've said, I saw an alien. I was abducted by an alien. I worked at a certain place. Maybe there are some disinformation people. Maybe some people were abducted by my lab military people. Maybe some people were brought in to work in a base as a cover to make them spread disinformation. I don't know.
Right.
But I think that you can't say that someone would have talked when people have talked, but you just don't believe them. And you can't say that the government can't keep secrets when, the classic example is the atom bomb. But I think moreover, like they've managed to keep a handle in the mainstream zeitgeist and media. Like they're still like, okay, Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. If you look into the JFK assassination, that's just like one of the craziest things in the, like completely implausible on its face, merely from the physical evidence.
Yeah.
Talking about bullet entry points in the,
the biggest thing for me was the bullet. Like
the magic bullet.
Well, it's not even so much magic, but just when bullet hits bone, it shatters. A bullet will shatter, a bullet will bend, it will break, it will shrapnel, and the bullet came out perfectly, and it went through 2 people.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's just that doesn't make any sense. I agree with you, and look, I don't want to get into a JFK rabbit hole,
me either.
But I agree with you. Like, there's got to be one of these government employees that has come out. One of them has to be telling the truth, you would think.
Yeah.
But even their truth, again, like let's just propose for a moment that we did figure something out. We do have a craft that does these crazy maneuvers and can travel, who knows, to wherever in our solar system. Let's just speculate wildly for a moment. And someone who worked in that building stumbled across this project and wasn't privy to the technology, doesn't have really enough information to determine, oh, this is human made.
Right.
It's, like, I just feel like there's a possibility for that too.
Yeah, there's a possibility
for someone to just read the information incorrectly and then pass it on incorrectly, as an assumed thing, basically.
Like Piper's point, that people could mistake a Rolex for cooling magma. I think it is definitely. We are all dealing with an imperfect data set, and we are drawing conclusions from different imperfect data sets, incomplete and potentially sullied with domestic and foreign disinformation. And we're doing our best on these. So that's why, like, who knows about this Eisenhower story?
Yeah.
But I do think you should research, if you're interested, these different angles.
It doesn't hurt.
Each angle is coming at it from a different place and a different source.
Well, more knowledge is not going to hurt you. So the more knowledge you have, the better. And that's why I wanted to talk to you about it tonight. I wanted to try and poke as many holes as I could into it and really just, and dude, that's what we're here for. Just trying to get to the truth, man. Just trying to get to the bottom, to the answer the question. And I'm sure we never will, but try and answer the question that we all have. And, is that, are we being visited? Are we alone? Is that a possibility? Is that happening? And the beautiful thing, and this is, I think, where we'll end it. The beautiful thing is that now the information is starting to become scientifically backed. Now the information is starting to come from chairs, on the astronomy board at Harvard. Now the information is starting to come from former CIA directors. And, going back to what Midnight Piper said, you can't trust anything the CIA says. But it is interesting that someone on that level has come out and said something. You've got international scientists coming out and saying things, like this is we're on the precipice of something different. It's no longer just a story or a sensational thing that really only a handful of people saw. And we just don't know if those handful of people are just reading the information incorrectly, or they're actually, what they say is what it is. And it's just hard to pinpoint that because, the story's 70 years old. But now we've got video. Now we've got, fighter pilot testimony. The information is just been turned up a notch. It's almost like, Spinal Tap. No, we want 11. The information's going to 11, and we're sort of seeing that switch in the process of cranking up. And who knows what kind of information and what sort of stuff starts popping up when science really starts diving into this, and maybe we get maybe the big phone home is a huge success, and we get Congress to release some legitimate information. Worth a shot. But all right, man. Thank you, John, for stopping by. Thank you for joining me, dude. Thank you for entertaining me here on this almost 2.5 hour discussion, man. It's always fun talking with you. It never feels as long as it is. But I want to thank everyone in the chat. Is there anywhere you want to plug anything, John, as far as your Twitter handle or?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Thanks for having me, Lou, and thanks to everybody who's tuning in and will in the future. Yeah, you could follow me on Twitter. I'm at John Dardenne, my name, Dardenne, at John Dardenne. And that's, you know, I'm on all the socials, but you can follow me on Twitter because I need more followers because I'm trapped in a 3D lifestyle in which I'm seeking approval. See how quickly I turned from the quiet contemplative UFO guest to the comedian guy back.
That whores himself out to
Yeah,
my 8 viewers. How dare you? But no, man, the 8 viewers, 100 viewers, 1 million viewers. I thank every single one of you, honestly, from the bottom of my heart for joining us tonight. Again, don't forget to ring that bell so that way when we do our interview with Lou Elizondo next week, you guys are here for that. I'm telling you, you're not going to want to miss it. You think I'm poking holes in John's Eisenhower report? Wait till you hear some of the questions that I got lined up for Elizondo. You know, so it's going to be a good time. We're going to have a lot of fun. And that's it. Yeah. Before we go, of course, I want to say thank you to sponsor BlueMarlinChronicles.com, purveyors of the world's finest fishing tackle since 1995. I want to say thank you to DOS Tapes. They provide all of the music you hear on the show. Their SoundCloud link is in the description below. Don't forget to follow the Facebook, the Big Phone Home Facebook page. More information will be coming. The more hands I get on board, the more people we get tweeting about this, talking about this, sharing this idea and this concept to call Congress and really hold their feet to the fire and try to get some substantial UFO information out of them. It's worth a shot. You know, worth a shot. So join us in the fight. Other than that, you guys, thank you all so very much for coming aboard, getting weird with me here on another episode of the Unidentified Celebrity Review, your home for credible news, reviews, and commentary on everything UFOs and sometimes other things. Until next time, you guys, stay safe out there. Peace.